Hey everyone, and welcome to another one of our videos. Today we're going to be doing the installation on my 2011 F-150 Raptor of this GJ Motorsports power steering cooler kit. These trucks are notorious for having the power steering coolers leak. They're built into the AC condenser. It'll leak in the top left side of the condenser as you're looking at it from the front, so in other words the top passenger side of that condenser. And mine started to do that. It started to seep a little bit of power steering fluid. It's not dripping or anything, but it's enough to be damp. It's a problem that needs to be addressed. So instead of replacing the entire AC condenser, which is the factory forward method of fixing this problem, I decided to bypass the kind of nonsensical design entirely and just install an aftermarket power steering cooler. From what I understand, these actually should cool the power steering fluid better, which is an issue on these trucks if you go off-road or if you like to do donuts and full lock-to-lock turning. In my case, the particular truck that I'm doing this on is one that I pretty much keep on the street, so I should have no issues with running just this. In fact, hopefully it's going to be better than factory. So this kit's pretty straightforward, other than the plumbing. The plumbing is going to be the most difficult part of this, although it really shouldn't be too terribly difficult. But what the kit comes with is the cooler itself, which comes set up with brackets to more or less fit the truck. This may be a universal off-the-shelf one, but it's set up in a way that's conducive to fitting on these. And then it comes with a couple of brackets to actually mount the cooler to the front core support of the truck, a couple of bolts and washers to get that done as well, and then some hose clamps as well as some Continental power steering hose. Now in my case, I'll show a little bit more of this at the truck. My plan and hope is to reuse one of the existing power steering lines. I just put new ones in on this truck whenever I redid the cooling system not too long ago. So my plan is to kind of tuck one around the core support, and again, we'll get into more of this later, and then use this line to replace the other one that's going to be coming from the cooler as well. And then obviously in this process, my plan is to flush out the power steering fluid from those lines to do all this transition, and then flush it out of the current cooler / AC condenser as well, and then cap those ports off, the ports that look like this that are kind of barbed fittings on that power steering cooler, the current one, so I don't have any long-term seepage or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead, head on over to the truck, show you what we're working with, show you how we're going to get started, and we're going to start doing the work. All right, so this is what we're working with on the front of the truck, and actually before we start on the plumbing, we're going to move over here and you can see the power cooling seepage. If you see a wet spot around here, and I'm not going to be able to get it on camera, but if you look up close, tucked behind this plastic here on the actual end caps of the condenser, you see a lot of coagulation of fluid there, buildup of fluid there, and then it's bone dry over here. You may be able to pick that up from far enough away with light reflecting off of it, but it's really tough to see on camera, and it's tough to see in person until you get up close with a flashlight. But basically this power steering cooler is going to mount right here above the transmission cooler. I have the larger overseas market one on this truck, and it should still fit no problem and bolt into place. And basically the way that the bracketry is going to work is we're going to sandwich some brackets, I believe, behind here, either here or here, one of these two slots, to hold one into the cooler where we don't have a bolt hole, and the other bracket is going to pick up on this bolt right here. So I'm going to pull this one out for the hood latch, put the cooler on, and then put everything back together. So that's how the cooler is going to physically sit. The ports are going to point towards the driver's side, and then the lines are going to tuck in the same manner that the transmission cooler line does, back behind and through the core support, kind of. So I'm going to end up taking this cover loose right here, and then we're going to end up running the lines kind of up and through the way that they actually do right now, more or less. So if we look underneath here, this is some wiring for the Morimoto headlights that I have, but underneath there, these are the two connection points to the AC condenser for the power steering. So one of these, I believe the one with the blue clamp, is the one that I'm going to reuse. It's the one that goes from right here on the power steering reservoir, underneath the airbox, and into the cooler. That's the one that I'm going to reuse. That one should have enough slack, and again, it's going to be nearly impossible to pick it up, but it should have enough slack to tuck down and around and right to that cooler, I believe. That's the hope, at least. The line that I won't reuse is the one that's, I believe, up here. That's the one that dips under and around with the metal tube and then pops into hose right here and connects to another hard line right there. So this one right here, that's an Oetiker clamp. That's going to have to get cut we'll pop this line off, and then we should be able to run a new line all the way down and around and through. It would be nice if I could reuse both of them, but I don't think that's going to be possible. We'll see whenever I get them off. Maybe it will be, but you know, that very much remains to be seen, because I believe this one's got enough hard line tucking down here that I'm not going to have enough flexibility to get it out and all the way out and through and then tucked over. So we'll see. But if that's the case, what I'm going to do regardless is cut this clamp and start sucking fluid out of the power steering system. I want to do this in as least messy of a way as possible, because I have my engine bay relatively freshly detailed, so I don't want to make a huge mess and have to do a bunch of cleanup after this. So my plan is to get a little fluid extractor in here, just a vacuum powered one. You could also do it with like a pump style one. And whenever I pop this off, cap one of the two ends, either the hose or the hard line, and then pull the fluid out of the other end. That should let me get all of the fluid out of the power steering system that's going to be within these lines, as long as I can pull enough vacuum through those lines to get the fluid actually all the way out. But as long as I'm able to, then I should be able to basically suck this entire system dry with a fluid extractor and then do this pretty much mess free. Because you can see once you get in here, it's already tight working quarters. There's no way you're going to get any kind of cup or funnel or anything underneath those lines to keep a mess from happening. So fingers crossed we can do that, otherwise there's really no way to do this without a mess. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to getting my fluid extractor set up, and then popping loose the top line and going from there. All right, so before we start on the replumbing, I'm going to go ahead and get the the power steering cooler mounted, and at least test fit it. I may have to dismount it to get the lines through and everything, but I'm going to start to get some disassembly done. So I'm going to go ahead and take the passenger side bolt out of the hood latch, 10 millimeter. This one is tighter than tight, probably because it's in one of the thread forming bolts and or held in with a significant amount of Loctite. Yep, thread forming bolt. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that guy taken loose. Once this guy's out, you should be able to bring the cooler pretty pre-assembled. Over to the truck. And in theory, we can get this sucker pretty much in place. That guy goes straight on. This is going to have to tuck behind the hood release cable there. But we'll go ahead and get that started. Make sure that we have everything fitting here. Which it appears we do. And we can go ahead and get the other bracket set up over here. So the other bracket, hopefully we can see. No, we can't, so we'll end up moving the camera. The other bracket basically ends up dropping back behind here, and let's see, I'm going to try to do this two-handed without any helper, so it's going to be a little finagly. There we go. Okay, so that started there too. So, got both brackets set up, loosely dialed in, looking at where the lines come out. It's going to be interesting getting these tucked around over here, because they shoot right into the transmission cooler line. So this is one where I'm going to have to play around with a little bit, I think, and test fit some lines before I start taking things loose. Figure out what's going to work and what's going to not, and go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and get these guys tightened more or less into place, see where those barb fittings fall, and then we'll figure out where we want to go from there. All right, I figured I'd pause here and kind of recap with what I've done so far before I move on any further. A lot of this I ended up having to do off camera because I had to get so far down into the truck for some of these things, and fluid extraction and kind of inspecting the lines and whatnot. So I actually took the power steering cooler and flipped it around with where the barbs were shooting out, as you saw in the last little bit. They were going right into this transmission cooler line right here. That was an absolute no-go. There was no way. I was thinking maybe we could get the lines tightly packaged in there. No way to do that. So I ended up flipping it around. Totally clears the grill and everything. You know, there's no issue with that. It actually is fairly flush and sits a little bit further in than the horns. So totally fine orientation as far as I'm concerned, at least at this point in time. The lines will still be able to shoot behind the little shroud here that I took loose. So we should be in good shape there, actually. I got the top bolts tightened down. The bottom ones I don't have fully torqued down in place yet, just in case I need to move things around and shift things around a little bit. We can see in through here the actual line that's going to end up coming up, being reused from the existing power steering cooler back here. That's the one I'm planning on flipping kind of up and right into either the top or the bottom barb here. That one should be no problem to reuse. I'm assuming the fittings are the same size they appear to be, and I can only imagine that the hose that was provided is the same size as this hose. Still remains to be seen, of course, but you know, we're getting there, and we're working on some pretty safe assumptions, I think. So inspected that looks good. Inspected the other line, definitely can't reuse that one, unfortunately. It is actually mostly hard line and basically has a little stubby of rubber tubing on either side, and that's it. So definitely not going to be able to reuse that one, unfortunately. That said, I got the Oetiker clamp up here taken loose, so that line should be able to actually slip off of the barb there. I did extract all of the power steering fluid from the reservoir, at least as much as I can get with a fluid extractor. The rest I'm hoping is not much, and I'm also hoping that I'm able to just get that out by extracting whenever I pop this loose. What I'm going to do is pop everything loose over my little catch tray I have over here, and let anything that drains out drain out, and then extract the fluid out of the lines, and hopefully that will get all of the fluid out of the lines that otherwise would spill whenever I take these guys loose. The one that I'm moving, I can move in pretty short order. The other one I'm going to have to wheedle out, so I really kind of have to get the fluid all out of that one, otherwise I'm going to make a big old mess. So going to move forward with popping this line loose over the tray, and then I'll potentially circle back there, or I'll circle back whenever I have some more significant progress. All right, so you can see we have a lot taken apart and reconfigured now at this point. So the lower line from the stock cooler, I now have disconnected and moved out. The way I was able to disconnect it was using some remote cable driven pliers, these ones right here specifically, in order to get down in here. You can see where the old barb fitting is. Get the hose clamp loose, slid back enough. I had to loosen the radiator just a little bit, the one bolt that's on this side here. You can see the nut portion of it right in there. So I loosened the radiator to give it a little bit more play, but was able to get that hose slid off the barb and then just flipped it down here, and I'm running it right now at least into the lower of the two barb fittings on the new cooler. It can fit into both, or fit onto both, no problem. I would like to keep it on the lower one just because that was the same configuration as stock right here. Now what I need to do is run the new line and also get rid of the old line up here. So this line, like you saw, is disconnected. Disconnected all the way down, then it just runs basically down and around. Hopefully we can see that with the sleeving on it there, underneath the radiator and back up here into the cooler. It's a circuitous route, kind of almost creates a P-trap in a way. I'm not sure if that's intentional or not, but we're actually going to be following a pretty similar route, so we're going to have the same kind of cavitation characteristics as what was stock. So basically what we're going to end up doing is taking the line that came with the kit, running it from this barb here, following this one's path basically until we hit roughly the radiator. Once we hit the radiator, we're going to shoot up, shoot over, and we're going to have to trim the line into place to fit the stock metal hard line here. We're going to retain that. That's the one that goes down to the pump. So at this point, what I need to do is take off that factory hard and soft line there. That guy's going to be removed, and then we're going to go ahead and run the new line. It should be pretty straightforward. I'm gonna kind of build the new line in a little bit better of a way as compared to how it came, and then I'm gonna sleeve the whole thing. And depending on how these lines sit, one thing I do want to note is that this line right here, you can see the factory sleeving on it. I believe this is factory sleeving and not sleeving that I put on, but the factory sleeving ends right there by the radiator. So what I'm gonna do is, obviously this isn't the final installation of this, I'm gonna end up pulling off that line, and I'm probably gonna re-sleeve all the way down and back, basically as far as I can reasonably get, until it's an open airspace back there, just to make sure that there's no abrasion that happens to that line on the radiator, and that it's protected a little bit from the heat of the intakes. Not that that should be too terribly hot for a rubber line like that. So a little bit more work, but we've made some pretty significant progress here. I will say the way that I evacuated the fluid too as well, I ended up using my little fluid extractor. It's got a 6mm tube. I stuck the 6mm tube down in the reservoir, and then there's a little hole towards the front of the reservoir, probably right around underneath my finger here. I was able to stick it down to basically get all the way into the bottom. And then what I did was extract all the fluid that I could, and then stuck an air nozzle in here, and then blew with about 30 to 50 psi of pressure, very carefully, the lines out. So that brought a lot more power steering fluid out of the cooler and the line set, and ended up with all of it getting extracted out of the reservoir. At least on the first line that I took off, which was the lower one, not a drop of fluid spilled, which is fantastic. So you can actually see fairly well that barb fitting down there is dry as a bone. So that idea worked out really well. I'm gonna go ahead and do the little last bit of disassembly, and hopefully I can come back and have some significant reassembly done actually as well. All right, so we've made some pretty significant progress, and I've got things kind of mocked up here, and partially actually buttoned up as well. So I did all of my alignments of the cooler. It actually can't align perfectly straight, unfortunately, which will bother me a little bit, but it kind of is what it is, and I can probably make a modification to align it perfectly. But I've got it leveled out as much as it can be. It's a little low on the driver's side. And then fastened fully into place. I made sure to Loctite all of the fasteners. They have lock washers on them too, but there, and there. I Loctited the plastic one that goes into the core support. I didn't. Those ones don't benefit a whole ton from Loctite. And then I got the line re-sleeved actually. There's some factory braided sleeving on this line. It only reaches a few inches in, like I'd mentioned. So I re-sleeved that to the point that it's actually, I have an aftermarket intake that the line almost touches as well. It follows the line underneath and up past the intake a little bit. You may be able to see it here, but it follows it just to about that point down there to make sure that there's no abrasion of that line and popping of a power steering lid at any point. So I've gotten that taken care of. That line's actually buttoned up and ready to go. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna end up running the factory clamp on this one. It's a little wide for the barb here, but it should have no issue gripping and holding. These aren't high pressure lines, they're just the return lines. Where I ran into issue is, and this is where this kit falls a little bit short, but I'll make it right and I'll make it work, is in the fitting sizes. So these both are 3/8 inch barbs, more or less. They may be a metric size too, the metric equivalent. But they fit this line perfectly. This line flipped down, no problem. But the power steering cooler, the factory one, has two different line barb sizes. It has 3/8 for this one, and the line that actually comes from the pump up and around and down and into the top of the cooler is a 1/2 inch line. So that's the one where it's two little short rubber pieces and then a hard line in between that connects here and connects to the top of the cooler. That one's 1/2 inch on both sides. So what I have to deal with now is adapting 3/8 down here to 1/2 inch up there when the line that was provided with the kit is only 3/8 inch. So what I'm gonna end up doing is one of a couple different solutions, but basically what it's gonna end up being is running a 3/8 inch line, using the line from the kit, from the barb here, up and through, basically the same path as what it followed before, sleeved of course as well, running up to somewhere in this vicinity, and then I'm gonna have a 3/8 to 1/2 inch barb type of adapter, go from that line to a short piece of 1/2 inch line. So what you're gonna have to do, and I'll put part numbers in the video description below once I have the whole solution figured out and devised, is buy some 1/2 inch line. Normally you can buy that by the foot in most auto parts stores. I ended up ordering like a 10-foot section online because it was actually about half the price to order 10 feet as it was to order just a few feet at an auto parts store. So ended up ordering that. That will come soon. And then I'm gonna use a couple different adaptation solutions, like I said. to effectively barb together the 3/8 and a half inch line. So once I have that, once I have the materials in, I should say, I'll get back over to the bench. It'll be a few days later than it is right now, and then we'll revisit, pick up the video at that point basically, and go through what we're gonna need to do to finish this up. The other thing I wanna mention is that down here, you can see a little red cap in there. I ended up capping the lower line. I had a appropriate size vacuum cap basically for that. So the lower barb, I should say, on the old power steering cooler. The upper one I don't have an appropriate cap for. That I'll have to get. I did clamp the lower one on as well. The upper one I'll clamp on as well. The other thing I may end up doing is just using some of the 1/2 inch tubing that I'm getting and running it to a little breather filter. The reason for that is because if I cap both of those and keep the power steering cooler airtight inside, I'm probably eventually going to blow one of those caps off whenever the AC condenser heats up, when it's actually doing its job and exchanging heat from inside to outside through the air conditioning system. So I have a feeling that I'm probably going to end up building up enough air pressure in there from the trapped air to blow one of those off. So I may end up extending it to a little breather filter, like a little K&N one somewhere up here or something like that. We'll see. I also have on the front side of my intake a huge hole, which is just how it pulls in some of the quote-unquote cold air. It also ducts into the fender, but for some reason it has an engine bay intake too. I may just plop the filter in there or otherwise mount it to that intake box or something like that if I do that. But I'll let you know what I end up doing for that. I don't know how well it's going to fit and such. So that'll be some playing around and figuring some stuff out here. Once I have the materials in, again, I'm basically waiting on 1/2 inch line and some barb fittings at this point. So overall, going pretty well. Coming out very, very nicely. Super happy with how it's coming out. It's just going to take a little more work than I thought. So we'll go ahead and pick this back up here in just a second. All right, so a few days have passed and we finally have in front of us what I believe to be a solution to all of our adaptation problems for hose. So after playing around with a couple different options, I ended up with what I believe to be the best solution overall for the adaptation of the 3/8 inch to 1/2 inch hose. So what I ended up having to do was purchase, I ended up actually purchasing a roll, but purchased some 1/2 inch ID power steering hose. This one right here, I ordered a roll of Gates part number 349970. This hose right here is that, and that is actually the OE hose that Ford uses in the actual OEM power steering line as well. So they use it with a crimp-on connection on the end and everything, but this is the same exact hose as what they're using with the crimp-on connections. Double-checked and the part numbering and everything matches. So that's good. That's I'd really like to use OE stuff if and when I can, just to keep the look of inside the engine bay and everything looking original, and we know that the quality is going to be there. Adapting it down, I'm going to use the Continental power steering hose that came with the kit. Now, what I ended up doing is purchasing an adapter, a barb adapter. I looked at a couple different ways of doing this. This, I believe, is going to be the best. This barb adapter is McMaster Carr part number 5361K95. I also ordered a different one as well, which is part number 6739N576. Both, I believe, will work. This is one that I'm using just because the look of it, in terms of the finished overall look, is going to be a little bit cleaner. The other one is going to be totally as functional as well. This one's also a little bit less expensive too, so probably the better option for folks out there if you want to save a little bit of money on this. You could also go to the hardware store, get a brass adapter. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to stick with a nice little stainless one. So all of that said, we now need to put the hoses together. So I've started and gotten a little bit further along on the 1/2 inch section of the line. This is the part that's running up from on top of the radiator down to roughly next to the driver's side headlight. That's where I'm going to put this joint just so it's hidden. It's going to be in a place where it's very easy to inspect. You're just going to pull the flap back that's next to the driver's side mud flap to look at it if you want to check it for leaks or anything like that. So super easy area to inspect, but it's hidden away so it's not out there in the open. You could totally put this on top of the radiator and just run a short little section of 1/2 inch hose if you wanted to, from the point on top of the radiator where the power steering return line comes up, and then adapt to the hose that comes with the kit. Completely up to you, but that's where I'm locating it just for aesthetic purposes. I'm also putting the nice nylon abrasion resistant sleeve on this one. This is very much in a similar manner to the OE ones, the OE lines that have this at least, where it's going to end obviously before the clamps, and I end up burning the ends of this basically a little bit with a torch just to make sure that they don't come frayed exactly the same way as the OE stuff does. There's better ways to terminate this, but again, I want it to look factory, so that's kind of what I'm going for there. And then I've got some of the, what I call Oetiker clamps, I believe, because that's the OE, or the original designer of these. But they're also called stainless steel single ear hose clamps. And I've had a kit of these for a long time, and I have, luckily, the sizes that I need here. So the largest size in the kit, which ranges from 17.8 to 21 millimeter hose OD, is going to be what I use on both ends of the larger hose. And on the smaller one, I'm going to be using the one right here that ranges from 15.3 to 18.5 millimeter OD. So both of these hoses are within those ranges. They should crimp no problem. And again, like you saw earlier in the video, this is what was used on the factory hose. On earlier revisions, there was a constant tension clamp, I believe, used. But on the later revisions of the hose, it definitely uses this, because that's what I got with the power steering hose that I ended up actually taking off to replace with all of this. So that said, I'm going to go ahead and finish the assembly of this off camera. It's literally just sticking hoses together with barb fittings and clamping stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the assembly, finish the test fitting. You can see I haven't trimmed this hose to length yet, but I'll come back with the assembled unit just to give you guys a little bit of a guide if you want to follow the same exact path that I did. And we'll go from there and finish up the install. Once this is all assembled, it should just be dropping into the truck and really buttoning things up from there. Pretty simple. Okay, here we have our finished product. So I have a hose made of two pieces of hose now, with the coupler in the middle, or the double barb fitting in the middle. I ended up cutting 16 inches of the 1/2 inch hose and 8 inches of the 3/8 hose. That places the barb fitting right about where the pass-through is, where we're passing through the core support. It ends up sitting in a pretty decent spot where it kind of braces itself with the bend radius of the hoses and everything against the core support, which is a point with the wrap and everything that I put on it that I'm not super worried about abrasion of either the core support or of the hose, especially since we have the metal clamps that are really the parts that are touching, the way that I've clocked it at least. So if you build the hose this way, you should be all right. Obviously, truck build tolerances may vary, of course, too. So double check the measurements on your own vehicle if you're doing this. Otherwise, you can see I actually redid the sleeve. I ended up using the same 3/4 inch TechFlex sleeve across the entire length of the hose and did one contiguous run instead of like two different pieces. Again, to help protect that area. Zip tied it down there to hold it in place and zip tied the two ends. Ford doesn't do this, but I like to, and actually did that on most of my original Ford hoses too whenever I redid this system a while back. So now we're ready to install. I have another Oetiker clamp here. This is, again, the part that goes at the top of the radiator. And then over on this side, I ended up actually finding in my stash of clamps one of the OE Ford power steering line clamps for the smaller 3/8 inch line. So lucky find there. I normally do save all of my clamps off my hoses and whatnot, so I was able to find the exact same one that's going to match the one that is currently on the power steering cooler on that factory line. So win there. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and get the line installed, clamped in place, set in place, and then as long as everything looks, smells, and feels right, really we're going to be down to filling up the system. So once I have it in place, I'll show you what everything looks like, and we should be able to wrap up the video from there. All right, so we have everything pretty much buttoned up here now. Cooler, again, still in place. Upper line routed, which is the one that routes, you can see in through here. Hose clamp is right there where the pass-through is of the core support. Comes up from down there as 1/2 inch line now at this point, and then up to here where we've got the connection back to the factory hard line. Just need to crimp this clamp, and we actually should be good to go and done with this. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing crimped, get everything fired up, get the power steering system bled, and we'll see how this thing holds up. There's a couple concerns I have, and I'll just show them real quick. Really, number one is just in general with the little clamps here. These should be all right, but I just want to make sure that they're good to go in terms of holding pressure, not sliding forward and back and so on. But the biggest one that I have is right here. This hose that was provided with the kit really is a little bit undersized. It's a little undersized on the 3/8. It's probably some metric line or something like that. And because of that, it doesn't want to fully slide onto the 3/8 inch barb here on the cooler. And so you can see the factory line that is 3/8, no problem. This one This is a little bit further out. I had to get the clamp just to the edge of the hose, which I don't love, and in order to get it inboard of the flare on the barb. So should actually be all right and everything. I just don't love the way that turned out, but it is what it is. So go ahead and get this system filled back up and bled out, and we'll see how it works. Well, we have our finished product here. I've started the truck, run the power steering through its bleed process, just turning the wheel left to right after topping up a couple times to make sure the fluid was full just at idle. So everything's bled, everything's good to go as far as that end of things goes. You can see whenever you bleed the system and all the lines heat up and everything, it'll push back the upper hose a little bit. I noticed this whenever I did the lines previously, so perfectly normal there and expected. None of the other lines pushed back any, so we should be all good there. Inspected back in here, and everything's good to go, at least for the time being. Haven't driven the truck yet. I still have to cap off the top power steering port. I ordered a 1/2-inch inner diameter vacuum cap for that. So here's hoping that that works with a constant tension clamp on it. If it doesn't, then I'll figure something else out for that. Like I mentioned earlier, with the contraction and expansion of the air that's going to be trapped in there, I don't know if it's going to end up popping those caps off or, leaking a little bit of fluid out over time. We'll see. But at least once it all leaks out, it should be done leaking at least at some point. Otherwise, dialed in. Cooler's installed, everything's torqued to spec and all. Super easy install process other than having to make a hose and order a few parts to do that. So the cooler itself, if you can find this off the shelf, totally recommend getting that, and the brackets maybe too. If you gotta buy the whole kit, you gotta buy the whole kit, but just keep in mind that you're gonna have to make your own lines and order some of your own stuff on top of what you're buying here. Also, want to mention, I did end up trimming out the little radiator air dam shield there. Came out pretty nicely as far as that end of things goes. You could either probably trim up and follow up to here, or I chose to leave a flap up there of the original material, just to have it block as much air as possible. With that, I want to thank you all for watching. Please let me know down in the comment section if you have any comments, questions, or concerns below, and hope to see you in the next video. Take care.